Mulcair standing by in Montreal. CTV News political commentator, former leader of the NDP. Tom, your immediate reaction to the news?
It was expected, and we knew that after everything that happened before Christmas, Trudeau would not be leading the Liberals into the next campaign. Everything else after that became a question of timing, Todd. There was a strong human element to it as well. It's easy to overlook, but as you correctly point out, he was in his 10th year as Prime Minister. That involves a lot of sacrifice, and I think he deserves recognition and indeed credit for everything that he's put into the job. And on behalf of all Canadians, he deserves thanks. But at the same time, we're in a bit of a conundrum because of his holding on for so long. Of course, we're faced with a very tough U.S. government that is using everything from the threat of making us the 51st state to imposing 25% tariffs. And none of that is actually going to happen, but it's all part of the game with Donald Trump. And we needed some stability and security, and we're getting instability and insecurity. So it's a tough time. And you're correct when you point out in your, as you set this thing up, the rules of the race are not the normal rules with regard to the leadership of a national party. First of all, it's going to be shortened considerably, and it won't really give people enough time to sell memberships and do everything that has to be done. But everybody's going to have to play by those rules. But what's particularly important, and we shouldn't lose sight of, is that the person who wins the leadership race of the Liberal Party automatically will become the Prime Minister of the country. Now, that's huge. And it's not something that we see in other democracies, but it is what we've got under the British system that we've inherited. And it's going to be very, very important. There will be lots of people. We keep talking about the same cabinet ministers or the same couple of outsiders like Mark Carney and Christy Clark. I can guarantee you there are going to be some people you've never heard of saying, well, you mean I could become Prime Minister if everybody in my community comes and votes for me? Watch this. So it's going to be a raucous 77 days between now and the 24th of March. But it's, it's good to live in interesting times. And Canadian politics can sometimes be a bit soporific. Well, this is going to be lively. It's going to be fun. It's going to be worth watching and commenting on.
Yeah, we're going to show some of the contenders that people are already talking about. Tom, you're familiar with a number of these people, including, of course, the former Finance Minister, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, and a number of others, Mark Carney, maybe Christy Clark, former Premier of British Columbia. Yeah, it's kind of a Kim Campbell scenario, potentially, from back in 93. Mulroney facing, basically a wipeout in the polls. There's a progressive conservative leadership, and Kim Campbell defeats Jean Charest, a man you're very familiar with, of course. She would go on to become Prime Minister for a small amount of time, and then they were wiped out. Only 2 seats left over after that election. What difference does a new leader make for the Liberal fortunes, do you think, Tom?
I think that the biggest difference a new leader can make is on the economy, which is still the number one driver of votes. That's why Poilievre has been pulling ahead. He's been talking especially to young people about their inability to have access to housing, for example. Their parents or grandparents had no trouble buying a house. In this, the second largest country in the world, we had lots of room for housing, but we don't seem to be able to get it done anymore. So Poilievre's zeroed in on that and done very well. If it were to be somebody like Mark Carney, he doesn't have the same problem as a Chrystia Freeland. Freeland or anybody else who's been in cabinet has the problem that every single bad Trudeau decision is in their knapsack. They've got to carry it around. She has stepped away from cabinet a few weeks ago, but that doesn't change the fact that, as Trudeau reminded everybody today, if it was meant as a parting hug, he hugged her like an anaconda, because that sentence where he says, and I want to thank Chrystia Freeland for being my closest partner on every decision for the past 10 years. Oops. Good luck trying to separate yourself from every Trudeau decision after that. Carney comes in, fresh slate, new ideas, tons of experience and expertise. Christy Clark, very engaging. I've worked with her on panels. She's whip smart, got a devilish sense of humor. She's really great. But one of the biggest challenges she has is she really doesn't speak French. Certainly not enough to take part in a debate or in a press conference or a scrum. So that would be a real handicap for her, because the Liberals have made it a point, especially over the last 60 years, but historically they've alternated going back 100 years between English-speaking and French-speaking leaders. For 60 years, it's been a requirement going back to the 60s that you have a knowledge of French and English when you go into a campaign. So it would be very hard for Christy Clark to check off that box.
Hey, before we go, is this good news or bad news for the Conservatives? What do you think?
Well, I'm just going to watch what the Conservatives did over the weekend, Todd. Pierre-Paul Huss, who is a very capable Conservative MP from the Quebec City area, and he's Poilievre's Quebec spokesperson, his Quebec lieutenant. He was out over the weekend, and he was not flailing away at Christy Clark or Chrystia Freeland or Dominic LeBlanc. He had only one target, and it was Mark Carney. That, to me, signals very clearly that the Conservatives know that the only person who can give them a run for their money is Mark Carney. The former governor of the Bank of Canada has the chops to pull this off. I know him because I had him to the university a couple of times. Very engaging. People say he's like Ignatieff. Anybody who says that, Todd, has never met the man. He's got lots of personality. He's very modest, despite his incredible accomplishments. And I think that he's the number one worry of the Conservatives for a reason. He's the number one contender who can actually maybe change things around for the Libs.
Hey, Tom, always good to see you. Thank you for this.
All the best, Todd.
Tom Mulcair with his take.